that's where we are so far. I think I'm going to call it a wrap at that for tonight, and go in, probably do some editing, and maybe even try and get this one published tonight. So we'll see. What date are we on today? Is it Wednesday or Thursday? I've lost track of the days. I think we're Thursday, aren't we? So we'll see how we go. And after moving the table up and more messing about and jiggery pokery, we are still on 0 up there. What you have to understand is the simple act of tightening and loosening the table a little bit can have a big effect on a dial test indicator, so it's quite difficult to get a true sort of reading. If I can zoom in on there, and I'm just going to sweep this under power. At that point we are to the right of the bore. Try and get a decent view of it. And if we go to the front, we're on 0. To the left, we're just before the 0. And at the back there, get round, we're on 0 again there. So sweeping that around, there's a little bit of needle fluctuation, but you're going to be hard pressed to get that much better than that. And that's from the drive side setup as well. Now the only other axis that we are not 100% on is vertical. So if I can, see, I'm left-handed and the camera's, you hold in your left hand as well. I've not got the quill locked at that. If I take that down, in fact, I'll just take it down then. If I take that down there, yeah, I can't go much more. Yeah, just the sort of grooves in the machining of the bore and little undulations that are picking up a needle flicker. You're going to be extremely struggling, really are struggle to measure that vertical over that shorter distance anyway. So at this point I think it's time to say, yeah, that's as close as I'm kind of going to get, and just squeeze your buttocks in and go for it, and we'll start the bore. I'll go through some measurements and where we're how deep we're going to bore and what size we're going to go to in a second. Boring head in with a boring bar. As previous videos, I'm going to be using those. Get that in the shot. They are Corloy AK inserts for turning aluminium. So I will be turning. Sorry, kicking the camera. So I'll be turning dry. So no comments about you're not using cutting fluid or coolant. You don't want it splashing on the camera, and there's no need to use it anyway for this operation. I can't spin the boring head to get my my 0 reference, so I'm just going to bring it down and use a bit of the ubiquitous spliff paper just as a poke that in under there, under the cutting tip, and bring the tool down until we just grip that bit of paper. There it is. And at that point I can set a 0 on my quill DRO. Just back off again. Now I just need to talk about where we're going to go with the. Alright, I'm tight. I'm trying to save the piece of paper. Put that out of the way. Where we need to go with depth. Get a little pointy stick. The original NKIB bearing was just, when it was fitted on them that other engine, was level with this point here. They'd left these recesses, ridges on that locks the original bush. They'd left that in place, so they'd bored from there down to the full depth of the bearing, which left I think about 5mm, 3/16 or something at the back there as a shoulder. So what I'm going to do, because I'm using that NA bearing, I don't need to go as deep. So I'm going to go and measure the NKIB and just compare the two, and I'm going to try and position this needle roller. No, actually I'll change my mind. I was thinking of putting it in the same position as the NKIB, but that'll leave it sticking up here. Right, you know what, I'm going to put it further in than that, and I think I'm going to do it in such a way that we end up, I may even put a circlip on the inside here, so it'll be up to a shoulder and retained by a circlip on the outer race, because that other one on the other engine had actually moved out a little bit. Now whether that was the effects of the trapped ball race or disassembly, I don't know. Right, I'll have a measure up and I'll come back and I'll tell you how deep we're going to go with this, because there's no point you hanging around while I scratch my head for 15 minutes and just see where I want to be. So back in a short while. You won't see this very clear on the camera at all, but I've got about 25mm of material to work with. The calculation works out, if I end up with about 3mm of shoulder at the bottom there, my bearing's 17mm wide, that'll give me 5mm up the top to get a circlip in, which is sort of a couple of mil for the circlip, and then another 3mm shoulder, another 3mm space down from there, from the top there to the circlip. If I end up doing a circlip, I'll see how it looks at the end. So I'm about ready, ready to go really. So 22mm. I'm just going to make a quick pen mark. Up here to remind myself. Let's write it up there. You can't see this, but I'm just making notes on the mill. And hopefully I'm set up for a scratch pass. Once I'm down to depth, I'll set the depth stop as well. Right, it's not, I thought my hand would get in the way, zoomed in enough out of the way. There we go. Well, that's pretty even. I'll get to depth and then we will see what we do about bore size. And this cast alloy Always cuts lovely with these AK inserts. I'm just watching my vertical quill digital readout here. Now I have been playing about with, I don't know if anyone's noticed it, I've been playing about with a power down feed for this machine because it hasn't got one. And it's another one of my unfinished projects. I've got a couple of stepper motors on it. Stepper motor on the quill down feed, I've got a stepper motor on the table X-axis and the controls and things, and I've just got to finish off one day putting it together. I've run this down feed one as a test and it seems to work okay. So I've got to build the control cabinet and put the power supply and stepper motor drivers in there. About halfway through them oil feed holes now. I'm going to make sure that they get blanked off properly as well, and I've just lost bugger. Right, I'm going to stop a second. I've just lost my digital readout there. Okay, we're back. The battery's a bit loose in the battery hole, so I've just put a little bit of that sticky sponge stuff behind the cover. The battery was okay, fortunately. And just got my zero back again as well. We're at about 17mm there. And I'm just keeping a visual eye on it as well to make sure we look about right. I don't want to go too far for obvious reasons. That is 21. I'm just checking the other side because the casting may not be the same both sides, and I'm just trying to see what the hole looks like on the other half. I'm going to stop again. Just get my little mirror. And looking in my little mirror, I don't know if you'll see it in camera, I've just gone past the hole this side from the pressure relief valve side, just clear of it. I want to try, if possible, to make the bearing blank them holes off, but I might be struggling because obviously it's not as wide and the groove is in a different, the oil groove at the back of it is in a different place to the NKIB bearing. So that is a 22mm deep. I'm now going to just set my depth stop on the quill, and then we don't have to worry about the digital readout so much. 22mm or 7/8 if you're working in Imperial or you're American. And don't know what the hell I'm talking about with this metric stuff. Okay. That's my depth stop set. Right. Work out a diameter we're going to go to now. There's a bearing. That's 47mm OD. And I'm going to confuse everybody now because I'm going to start working in thou for bore. I'm that generation where we did metric and imperial, and I tend to flip-flop between the two, so even more confusing for our American friends. I'm sorry. That's 47mm, that's 1/8 0.5005 thou, and I'm going to aim for 1.5 thou interference fit on this. It's roughly, if we say 1 thou per inch of bore, without going to the manufacturer's website and going all through that, 1 thou per inch of bore interference will be sufficient, and that'll shrink fit in. I don't want to close up too much and end up with a notchy bearing. So at that I'll set, I'll get the T gauge out, the snap gauge, and we'll set that as I'll take 1.5 thou off that, we'll set that as 0, and then we'll kind of work up to it, if that makes sense. So back to the math lessons. I've measured the bearing. I've took 1.5 thou off that measurement. I've set that to an incremental, and now when we measure the bearing, get it in the view, we should get that's 1 thou. There we go, it's awkward around the camera. So 1 thou and 6/10, that measures now over. We're making sense on that dimension. So now when I hit 0 on that, when I get to 0 with my T gauge, I know I've got 1 thou and 6/10 interference fit. It'll all become clear as mud. And what I can do now is take a telescoping gauge. You're just going to see fingers and thumbs here. Poke her into the bore. Try and get as vertical as I can. Not too critical while we're at this stage. Very awkward working around this. Just move that to another position. It's better. So put it in what it calls snap gauges by some, because you only let it go, it goes snap. Put it in and sweep out once. And then zoom right out. Then we can measure, and we've got a negative number. Obviously we've got quite a lot to go. We wind in till we measure that. So 145 thou to go out until we get to our 0 point, which will be 1 thou and 6/10 under a bearing diameter. Are we following? This is lockdown schooling. Get your kids round here. Get them in front of the telly. See how bored they are by watching this. And there's another, I've got a fair bit to go before we get anywhere near close. All I'll be doing is stepping up a slight increment at a time. Boring down to a depth stop until we get somewhere near. this part literally will be boring, so I'm not going to film lots of it. I'll come back when we're close. Little update, that's where we're at so far. You can just see the shoulder in the bottom of the shot there, where the bearing will go up to. Now, have you been paying attention? When I was making the choice of bearing to use, I did say, I'd mention as I went along the differences between fitting the bearing I'd chosen and the NKIB bearing, which is that wider one. Now, the way I've machined this, that bearing on its track, on its outer track, is 23mm. So that will just sit proud of that edge and just slightly under them little retaining lugs, around about where the one sat in the previous engine. So if we want to fit the NKIB at this stage, we've machined deep enough to do so. Or we can fit, as I'm going to, the NA bearing and hopefully a circlip to retain it. And at the moment we're sitting at, if this is visible, we're sitting at, try and get the glare off it and work around the camera, we're sitting at there, negative 45.5 thou ish to go, to come out till we reach our 0 point. I've just had another measure. I'm now less than 10 thou away from my my target, 9 thou and 7/10. So now I'll slow down on the depth of cut I'm taking, just creep up slowly onto the target. And as I approach the target, I'm just going to pour a little mist of cutting fluid, in my case WD-40 equivalent, and just up my speed a little bit and slow my feed a little bit just to get a bit better finish on that surface. I'm now within 1 thou and 7/10 of my target. I'm going to do a spring pass, which means I do a cut without putting any more adjustment onto the boring bar, and just see where that gets me and remeasure, and then slight little tiny adjustments of the boring bar to bring me up to size. I'm now taking that finer cut towards the end. This is just a spring cut that you can't even see what it's taking off hardly. I've just done a couple of measurings and we're at zero, or within 1/10 of 0. That just swings in there. There's probably a funny angle for the television or computer screen, but that's going back out again. Yeah, I'm within 1/10. I'll remeasure and remeasure again to make sure I'm right before I move anything. and then on to the next bit. We won't be fitting the bearing just yet. I've got to clean up the cases again, make sure all the galleries are clear. In fact, I've actually got to probably retap that anti-drain valve thread a bit deeper to make sure I can lock off them galleries. As I say, before I move anything, I'll make sure we're absolutely right, because I don't want to take this off the mill table and then find out I've got to put it back on again, because your chances of getting it exactly the same place are almost zero. So I'll be measuring for the next 10 minutes to make sure.